Welcome to Brother Miller's Notes. I'm so glad you're with me today as together we study chapters 37 through 41 of the book of Genesis. Have you ever had the discussion with your siblings? All right, are you mom and dad's favorite? Who is mom and dad's favorite kid? I asked my dad that once. Dad, who's your favorite? And he said, like most wise fathers or parents should, you're all my favorite. And then he added, the trick is to let all of you believe that. And I'm thinking, yeah, I believe it. And then I realized, I think that's what he wanted. He wanted all of us to know that he was his favorite. Well, as you go in life, you think, okay, who really is the favorite? Okay, they get the bigger piece of chocolate cake. They get more presents. And maybe if you got kids, maybe you should be asking, do I have a favorite? Well, I follow my dad's injunction. Hopefully they all feel like they are my favorite. Because they are. I got 5 favorites, right? In the case of our biblical story that we're starting off there is a clear favorite. And one day in the resurrection, if you want to be able to recognize him, he looks a lot like Donny Osmond. Okay? And he's got a nice little jacket. Elder Jeffrey R. Holland, just kind of at the beginning, as we look at Joseph and his life, just noted that there's a lot of comparisons we can make between Jesus Christ and Joseph's life. Elder Holland said, quote, Moses, like Joseph, and so many others in the Old Testament, was himself a prophetic symbol of the Christ who was to come. And so even before we do any of the events of his life, let me just go over a couple things that you can look for at how Joseph's life parallels what's going to happen to Christ. Because in today's readings, really, you can see Christ, the story of his birth and his life, in what we're going to study today. So you look at Jesus Christ, you can read like Mormon chapter 5, verse 14, Moses 4:2, or Genesis 37:3. What do they have in common? Well, they're both a beloved son. And I'll put all these verses, I'm not going to read them, but I'll put all the verses in a table and put it in my notes at brotherrmiller.org. Okay, you could read in Luke and Genesis 37. What do they have in common? You're going through it. Well, they're both hated by members of the house of Israel. You have others in Genesis 37, 2 through 11. With Christ's life, you read it and go, what do they have in common? They both understood their missions at a very early age. For Jesus, you read Matthew 26, Genesis 37:18. Well, people conspired against both Joseph and Jesus. Jesus' life and Joseph's life, they are betrayed by people who were close to them and should have loved them and should have stuck up for them. Well, Matthew 27 and Genesis 37, both were betrayed by men named Judas in Greek, and were sold for pieces of silver. Both were sold for the common price of a slave. Hebrews 4:15, Genesis 39, both overcame temptation. John 8, Genesis 40, they both gave God the glory for the good things they did. And Mosiah 26:30, Genesis 45, 3 through 13, what do they have in common? They both willingly forgave. One more here. John 6:35, Genesis 45, what do they have in common? Both saviors to their people and bringing saving bread. Now, if you're teaching this, and this is the table I'll have on my website, you could either just put one side or the other and just give, hey, here's an introduction to this lesson. How is some events from the life of Joseph, and you put the verses on one side of the chalkboard or on a piece of paper, and events from the life of Christ, how are they similar? And just let students discover how you can see Christ in the life of Joseph. And then you say, okay, as we study this more today, what else can we add to this list? What other parallels in Joseph's life do you see with Christ? And then you just leave a little list, kind of tally going. Okay, just an idea. So you got Joseph and his awesome colored coat. Some suggest this was a sort of ceremonial robe with ornamentation or markings on it. For that reason, Joseph Fielding McConkie argues that the coat given to Joseph by Jacob was a priesthood garment. Well, in chapter 37, verse 6, he says, to his brothers, older brothers, hear you, I pray, this dream which I've dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. And his brethren said unto him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. They had perfect idea. They knew exactly what this dream was all about. That Joseph one day would be in charge of them, that he would be the birthright son. The second dream Joseph has. Dreamed another dream, verse 9. Told it to his brother and said, Behold, I dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren. And his father rebuked him, saying, and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow before ourselves to thee, to the earth? And his brethren envied him. But his father observed the saying. That's the idea, is kind of kept that saying in mind. It kind of notes some commentators just say that the way that's phrased is Joseph the father seemed to recognize there's truth in it. He keeps kind of saying to himself, he's not arguing against it. Hey, is this really going to happen? And yeah, I kind of think this is going to happen. Well, Joseph, as you can tell, we start off in here where my little cursor is, in Hebron. They're going to be taking their flocks up to this area. That's where they're going to be feeding them. When Joseph is sold into slavery, he's going to probably follow the route that the traders are going, because they're going to go to Egypt to sell him. Well, verse 37, back a little bit. This is the brothers. They're feeding the flocks. They see him afar off. Even before he's there, I can just imagine them. All right, little brother's coming. I don't like him. Words get a little more heated. They conspire to slay him. And they said unto one another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. That word in Hebrew I love. That dreamer literally is master of dreams. Behold, this master of dreams. I think they got it right. He is dreaming dreams and knows the interpretation, and they know that he has that gift, and they know he can interpret dreams. And then we get, for me, one of the most tragic characters in our story today. It's Reuben. Reuben's kind of one of those people that says, coulda, woulda, shoulda. When Joseph is there and they're conspiring to kill him, Reuben could have, as the oldest brother, stood up for him. But he has a weak spine. Instead, well, he woulda maybe said something and just said, hey, let's just not do this. Let's do the right thing right now. He shoulda been a better brother. But Reuben, he is loyal to brother. He is looking for a way to make this all work out. He does intervene when he sees something wrong. It's kind of, hey, let's not kill him. Let's put him in a pit. He'd sought a solution that saved face with his brothers. Not one that was right, but saved face. He didn't have the courage to act for what was right. Reuben had so much potential, but one of his failings is he just couldn't stand up and make the hard choice when it was right. At the end of his father's life, he gets what we would call a patriarchal blessing. The shortened version, his father says this is Genesis 49. Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity. Reuben, you have it all. You look good. You sound good. You're the oldest. You're the leader. And the excellency of power. Reuben, you got it all. But you got the but. You're as unstable as water. When the things blow, you wave. You ripple. And, as an example, and we didn't study this in the Come Follow Me, but he went up and to my father's bed and defiled it with one of his wives. He went up to my couch. There's a little bit of Reuben where he's aspiring. It's not only that I'm going to break the law of chastity. I'm going to do it in a way that says, Neener, Dad, what can you do? I should be Well, a little bit more like you. Didn't mean to have that sound like a poem, because I didn't mean it that way. Reuben's just being aggressive and wants to take the power and control away from Dad, symbolically in that act. Well, coulda, woulda, shoulda is a terrible life motto. And if you can learn something from Reuben, when you have an opportunity, make the right choice at the right time, even if it has difficult consequences, which is going to be the life of Joseph. What they do, put him in a pit, then they sell him for the price of a slave, and then they take the coat of many colors, this coat with markings, back to Dad. And in Genesis, Dad is mourning, and the brothers now have a shared sense of tragic guilt that they'll live with for years to come. Alma chapter 46, this is Moroni, notes that there was a belief that Joseph did not believe this. He didn't believe that a stray beast, a wild beast, killed his son. So according to Captain Moroni, here's what he says. And this is chapter 46, verse 24. Yea, let us preserve our liberty as a remnant of Joseph. Yea, let us remember the words of Jacob before his death. For behold, he, Jacob, saw that a part of the remnant of the coat of Joseph was preserved and had not decayed. And he said, even as this remnant of garment of my son hath been preserved, so shall a remnant of the seed of my son be preserved by the hand of God, and be taken unto himself, while the remainder of the seed of Joseph shall perish, even as the remnant of this garment. And you pause right there. If Joseph is saying that, he's realizing, number one, my son's not dead. Number two, son's not even married at this time, but he's prophesying there's going to be a remnant, he's going to have kids, his seed is going to be preserved, even though some will be destroyed. And then one of the things, this is a Hugh Nibley, one of those brilliant things that he learned, he said this, quote, this makes it sound as though Jacob's disbelief in the words of his sons were common knowledge in Moroni's day, yet when the Book of Mormon came forth, there was no support for such a claim. However, in one 10th century Muslim document, and I wrote it really, really small because I didn't know how to say the guy's name. Okay, but you can read it there and you can sound out better than I can. Only recently discovered, we see the same story Moroni told about Jacob's response to the news of Joseph's death. It actually claims that Joseph told the boys that the way of the cloth is torn shows him that their story is not true. Behold, if the bear had eaten him, he surely would have rent his garment. And since he would naturally have fled towards the gate, verily, the garment should have been torn behind. But since this is not the case, it may be that Joseph still lives. In other words, Joseph should have been running away, and the bear would have attacked him from behind. But that's not the way this looks. Well, as I said, he's 17 years old. He's taken from a passing caravan, sold. He serves in the house of Potiphar for 11 years. He spends 2 years in prison. And then he's made the prime minister. We'll get to the end of our story today, age 30. He's second in command of all of Egypt. Now, there are two individuals in chapters 38 and 39 that seemingly are the exact opposites. And I think these stories are there in parallel because you realize how good Joseph is, because you realize how maybe some bad choices Judah makes. And one of the things that does that is if you can look through Genesis 38 and go, what did Joseph do when he's tempted? And then let's compare it to what Joseph does when he's tempted. Well, Judah, when he's tempted, he deceives a member of his family for his personal advantage. When he's tempted, in chapter 38, he immediately gives in to temptation. In chapter 38, verse 22, he tries to keep his sin a secret. And when it comes out, in verse 26, he's humiliated when his sin is exposed. And you start comparing that to Joseph. Joseph is honest, and everybody knows the Spirit of God's with him. And he resists temptation over a long period of time. And I will spend quite a bit of time on these verses in a class setting. We'll just stop and go, let's read it. And so verse 7, And please hope you don't mind some of my commentaries. We just go along. And it came to pass after these things. Now, things are that he's been sold. He's now in a position of authority. He has the trust. And his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph. The Egyptian royalty had no real problem with adultery. It's a little bit of what their society is. But Joseph has different values and is going to keep them. Okay, eyes on Joseph. And she said, lie with me. Okay, that's pretty forward. Hey, do you want to have sex? Great. Verse 8, he refused. And said unto his master's wife, behold, my master willeth not what is with me in the house. He hath committed all that he has to my hand. In short, master doesn't even know what I'm doing. I'm in charge of everything. I come, I go. He has no idea what I'm doing. Verse 9, there's none greater in this house than I. Quote, side note here, if I wanted to, I could get away with it. It'll be a secret and no one will ever know it. Back to verse 9, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? His priority is very simple. It's not whether or not I'm going to sin or whether I'm going to succumb or whether I'm going to make you happy or I'm going to get in trouble or whether I'm going to keep a secret or not. It's very simple. I've learned a lesson. It's what God thinks. And I love Harmon Rector Jr. said this, quote, I believe this is the greatest lesson that can be learned by the youth of Zion, to do the right thing because you love the Lord. Now back to verse 10. Came to pass, as she spoke to Joseph, and you can imagine this, it's every day. And I can picture what Joseph is doing. He's coming, because of the context of what's going on here, you can picture him coming and doing his things, making sure he's not alone with her, making sure he can kind of avoid it, being socially okay, nice. But no, the answer is. So verse 10 again, she spake to him day by day. And he hearkened, that means he listened not, he's not obeying unto her to lie with her or to be with her. It's not just that he's not listening to her, but he's not even wanting to be around her. You're being this temptation. Here's a temptation. I'm going to avoid it. Verse 11, came about this time, Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. Okay, maybe all these things I've been trying to do just don't work right now. And she caught him in his garment, say, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand, and in the mighty words of Monty Python, run away, and fled, and got him out. I all know this classic picture of him just kind of run away. He could have overpowered her, he could have done a lot of other things, but it's kind of, I just got to get out of here. President David O. McKay said this. I think it's so appropriate. Resist evil, and the tempter will flee from you. If you keep your character above reproach, no matter what others may think or what charges they may make, you can hold your head erect because your heart light. Keep your heart light and face the world undauntedly because you, yourself, and your God know that you have kept your soul untarnished. Doesn't matter what other people think. You've kept it clean. And then this is just a side note. There's an apocryphal little document. It's called the Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs. It originates about 250 BC. It purports to be the last words of Joseph's sons. In his last testimony, Reuben, who strongly condemned immorality, he speaks of his brother Joseph as a great example of fighting off such temptations. Reuben says that Potiphar's wife had magicians try and hypnotize or entrance Joseph, and that she tried to get Joseph to drink potions or aphrodisiacs. According to Reuben, if you can't control promiscuous thoughts and desires, Satan will have power over you. And I just note that because I do imagine that she probably did a lot of things to try and seduce him. But it's his thoughts he kept pure. Sow a thought, reap an act. Sow an act, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap an eternal destiny. And one other thing with his last testimony, recorded in the same document, we're told Potiphar's wife did the following things to Joseph. Here's a big old list. She threatened his life. She had him tortured or beaten when he wouldn't give in. She offered all that Potiphar had if he would lie with her because she planned to kill Potiphar. She would accost him at night in his chambers. She would praise him for his moral strength and ask him to be taught the gospel. She would say that she would join the church and convince her husband to do the same if he would sleep with her. She threatened Joseph that she would kill Potiphar, and then she had drugged Joseph so they'd be married while he was drugged and had no ability to fight her. She threatened to commit suicide when in prison. She would send notes to him telling that if he would sleep with her, she'd get him released from both the fetters and from jail. I don't know how much of that's true, but it sure contains a lot of tactics that Satan or peer pressure in the wrong way get to maybe make us sin. But if all that's true, the greater respect I have for Joseph, for what he did. And I've learned that when all else fails, in case of temptation, run away. Maybe at this point, you stop with your family and just say, okay, maybe we did a lot of commentary, we did a lot of parenting, maybe the sermon on the couch has just been said. And now if you are Mormon, and you're the editor of this, you know I love his little commentaries. And thus we see, hey, here's what I really want you to see, and don't miss this. What do we learn from Judah and Joseph? Maybe take a minute or two. Write it out. What did you just learn from these 2 chapters? Because maybe in the writing of it, it'll help you to articulate, or maybe your kids and the family, how you can be a little bit more like Joseph and how you see yourself as like Joseph. Well, bad things happen to good people sometimes. Joseph gets put in jail. But you may be thinking, why do things always seem to work out for Joseph? I mean, he's in jail for over a couple years. Well, in Genesis, they don't want you to miss one thing. Because the Lord was with him. You get that chapter 39, verse 2, verse 21, verse 23. When things are repeated 3 times in a chapter, maybe that's a little bit of the Lord just saying, here's one of the greatnesses of his character. When you have the Spirit with you, things just turn out great in your lives. Well, and this is just an idea because right now, if you're teaching this in a lesson, you're like going, oh, I just need to change gears. You could do a little drama thing. If you're in class with youth, there are some who love this. There's also some who'd rather sit in their seats and not do it at all. But you get volunteers. All right, got a narrator, Joseph, Butler, Baker. And you say, okay, narrator, do a narrator voice. And they speak like this. And then you get Joseph's voice, and they'll be trying to be like bold and prophetic. And a Butler, great. Butler and a Baker, and they get great voices. This is actually more fun because the kids love this. A lot of times when I'm teaching it, you get the narrator. Sometimes Joseph placed in prison. Pharaoh became upset with his chief butler, and Chief Baker placed him in prison. Joseph was assigned to be their servant. One night, both the butler and the baker had troubled dreams. In the morning, Joseph noticed they were sad. Joseph, why do you look so sad today? So that sounds kind of like a Batman. Sorry, shouldn't have said done that way. Butler, we've dreamed a dream. Baker, and there's no interpreter for it. Joseph, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. Narrator voice. Chief Butler told him a dream. Butler. And then they have him read. Here's a few verses beginning with, in my dream. And then Joseph, hey, this is the interpretation. Narrator, when the chief baker saw the interpretation of the butler's dream was good, he told Joseph his dream. Baker, beginning with, I was also in my dream. Okay, and then here's the interpretation. And if you want this, I'll put it up on my website as kind of a narrator kind of thing. Well, I think most of our kids know the rest of the story. Pharaoh now going to have a dream. The butler and the baker's dream come true, and they go in. One is now in Pharaoh's service and totally forgets Joseph for 2 years. Until all of a sudden, hey, I've got a dream. And it's like, hey, wait a minute here. I got this guy who interpreted my dream. Why don't you bring him before me? And Pharaoh says, here's my dream. I went to the edge of a river, and 7 nice little big fat cows came out. Then 7 little skinny cows came out. I know you can probably tell this dream better than what I'm doing, but the lean cows ate the fat cows. Then the second dream, ears, 7 kind of plump, 7 stringy. And then Joseph interprets. Remember, he's a master of dreams. He's a master interpretator. He has a spirit with him. President Gordon B. Hinckley, and I always remember when he used these verses as a way to teach us something that he felt we needed to know today. President Gordon B. Hinckley said, "I wish to speak to you about temporal matters. As a backdrop for which I wish to say, I will read to you a few verses from the 41st chapter of Genesis. Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, dreamed dreams which greatly troubled him. The wise men of his court could not give an interpretation. Joseph was brought before him. Pharaoh said unto Joseph," and then he read several verses from the 41st chapter of Genesis. Then President Hinckley wanted to teach a couple things to us. "I want to make it very clear that I'm not prophesying. I'm not predicting years of famine in the future, but I am suggesting the time has come to get our houses in order. So many of our people are living on the very edge of incomes. In fact, some are living on borrowings. There is a portent of stormy weather ahead, to which we better give heed. I'm troubled by the huge consumer installment debt which hangs over the people of the nation, including our own people. President Heber J. Grant spoke repeatedly on this matter from this pulpit. He said, if there's any one thing that will bring peace and contentment into the human heart and into the family, it is to live within our means. And if there is any one thing that is grinding and discouraging and disheartening, it is to have debts and obligations that one cannot meet." And then I pause here. Always pay attention when a prophet quotes another prophet to teach a principle today. Back to President Hinckley. "We are carrying a message of self-reliance throughout the church. Self-reliance cannot obtain when there is serious debt hanging over a household. One has neither independence nor freedom from bondage when he is obligated to others. In managing the affairs of the church, we have tried to set an example. We have, as a matter of policy, stringently followed the practice of setting aside each year a percentage of the income of the church against a possible day of need." And then my comment, I'm so grateful they do that. Not only do they teach these things, they practice it. Oh, we have great leaders. Back to President Hinckley. "I urge you to look to the condition of your finances. I urge you to be modest in your expenditures. Discipline yourself in your purchases to avoid debt to the extent possible. Pay off debt as quickly as you can, and free yourselves from bondage. This is a part of the temporal gospel in which we believe. May the Lord bless you to set your houses in order. If you have paid your debts, if you have a reserve, even though it be small, then should storms howl about your head, you'll have shelter for your family and peace in your hearts. That's all I have to say about it. But I wish to say it with all the emphasis of which I am capable." And then Pharaoh is doing the summary of Joseph after he learns the interpretation of the dream. "Pharaoh said unto his servants, Can we find such one as this, a man in whom the Spirit of God is?" And he's given a few accessories. He's given fine linen. That's the material worn by the royal family and the highest officials of the kingdom. He's given a gold collar appertaining to the office of Grand Vizier. This much prized golden collar was bestowed upon public servants for their distinguishing achievement, and he becomes second in command of all of Egypt. Joseph does marry into the elite of nobility. His father-in-law was none other than Potiphar, high priest of On. That city is the great cultic center of the sun god Re. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, meaning, "God has made me forget completely my hardships and my parental home." That tells you a lot about how Joseph's life's going right now, but he had a lot of hardships. And the second of his children is named Ephraim, meaning, "God has made me fertile in the land of my affliction." Well, let me just give you a couple teaching thoughts, here at the end. If you were to have maybe you or your family class complete this sentence. From Joseph's life, we learn that if God is with us, then complete the sentence. I think you're going to have a lot of great things that are going to be shared as a summary of what we just learned, because that's one of the underlying themes throughout the whole chapter. If God's with you, you may have troubles, but things are going to work out. Trust Him. 2, I like the little phrase, what dating is to teenagers, blank is to parents. You do this to teenagers, and you get lots of great answers. You do this with parents, pretty soon they're zooming in on finances. What dating is to teenagers, they talk about it, they think about it. Finances is to parents. The time has come, President Hinckley said, to get our houses in order. Maybe it's a how session. Take a few minutes. Invite someone in just to come in and say, look, here's what I do for a living. Or, hey, maybe this is my calling. Here's a couple things that you can do today, practical steps to get your houses in order financially. Or emotional resilience. Here's how to teach emotional resilience to a family. You can have a couple people come in and just talk about that or talk about it in your home. You could make that a time where we're going to have family council and just talk about the finances. Here's where things go. And my hope is that you continue to look for Christ in the stories of the Old Testament. Hey, thanks so much for spending a few minutes with me as we talked about Genesis 37 to 41. Keep smiling.